Our reading this morning is titled Gate A4, and it's by Naomi Shihab Nye. Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal after learning my flight had been delayed for 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone is in the vicinity of Gate A4 and understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumbled to the floor, wailing. "Help," said the flight attendant. "Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her that the flight was going to be late and she did this." I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke haltingly. "Shada'a, shabi'uk habibti." The minute she heard any words she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for a major medical treatment the next day. I said, "No, you're fine. You're going to get there. Just late. Who's picking you up? Let's call him." We called her son. I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and ride next to her. I talked to him. She talked to him. Then we called her other son, just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This took up 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar, crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, from her bag, and was offering them to all of the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo. We were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There's no better cookie. And then the airline broke out all the free apple juice from the huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving it, and they were covered in powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with furry green leaves. Such an old country tradition, always carry a plant, always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying of confusion had stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. After living in Manhattan for over a year now, I have learned a few of the city's unspoken rules. 1, only talk about your favorite neighborhood bagel spot if you're willing to get into a fight about it. 2, if you value your mental health, avoid Midtown at all costs. And 3, if you hate living in New York City, nobody who lives in New York City wants to hear about it. After that subtle foreshadowing, you might be surprised to hear that I don't really like living in New York City. Yes, the food is good, and the parties are fun, and honestly, the people's cold demeanor doesn't really bother me. I am from Boston, after all. The reason is so cliche, I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit it. But the truth is that I have never felt more lonely than I do in the city. It's a classic predicament we've all heard before, being surrounded by hundreds of people and passing them by on the street in the most densely populated city in America, and feeling more alone than I ever have been. Another unspoken rule of New York City that I'm sure you all know is that you should not make eye contact with people on the subway. These days, that's pretty easy to do. Everyone has their little pocket computers to stare at, and wireless headphones as armor against unwanted conversations. Some days I get on the subway and I feel a deep sense of grief, looking around at everyone staring at their phones in their laps, as I myself try to resist looking at my own device. But the days when I choose not to use my headphones, or, let's be real, I forget them at home, I do sometimes find myself in uncomfortable positions, like getting verbally harassed by men for personal information I don't want to give, or listening to someone in distress ask desperately for help I can't provide. On those days, I'll admit that I miss my armor, the illusion of separation that a pair of headphones might offer me. In order to protect myself, sometimes I choose isolation. Do you ever do that? It's vulnerable to let ourselves be open to other people. It's scary. But the cost of separation, the cost of humans not being able to be in community with one another, it's really high. As a social work student, one of the ways I've learned how to understand human motivation is through the 5 core social motives. The first and most important of the motives is belonging. The ability to feel seen and held by others is essential to people's survival. To remove one's sense of belonging, some psychologists argue, is one of the worst forms of social punishment at our disposal. We need each other. As Unitarian Universalists, one of our guiding principles is the interconnected web of life. This principle acknowledges how we are tethered to each other, to the environment, and to all living things by the spirit of life, God, whatever you want to call it. We are interdependent. But our UU commitment to interdependence is not purely based on vibes. It's also based in science. I'm sure many of you have heard about the research on the necessity of touch. There's this one study dating back to 1915 that studied infants under the age of 2 in orphanages across the country. The children, the babies, were dying of unknown causes. But when the children were given consistent touch and affection, the unexplained deaths ended altogether, leading the scientists to conclude that touch itself is integral to human survival. Last spring, in an effort to become more aware of where I come from and to feel less alone, I decided to take on the long-term project of learning about my own ancestry. Over Zoom, my Uncle Adam pulled up a family tree. He told me crazy stories of scandal and infidelity, gleaned from newspaper cuttings and genetic discrepancies in our family. I noticed one of my great-grandfathers had 6 siblings, 3 of whom all died in 1942 of unknown causes. I began to ask my uncle, but I quickly realized I could guess their unknown fate. 1942 was not a good year to be a Jew in Eastern Europe. For as much as we talk about the Holocaust as a site of exceptional and unimaginable violence, being abducted, being forcefully separated from one's family or home, is not an uncommon experience in the history of humanity. Historically, separating people from their families and communities has been used as the ultimate punishment. Last spring, on a pilgrimage to Selma, Alabama for the anniversary of Bloody Sunday, I visited the Legacy Museum in Montgomery. It was an incredible and immersive experience that I highly recommend. But I was struck by one particular panel on the wall detailing the innumerable horrors of enslavement for Africans in the US. It said, in essence, that separation, the forced removal of children from parents and couples from their partners, was perhaps the most painful aspect of enslavement. The word separate is derived from the Latin root separare, to pull apart. In this meaning, separation is embodied. The word's root invokes the visceral, literally pulling something away from itself. In its many forms, separation is all around us today, isn't it? There are forced separations. like the chaos of the militarized ICE abductions and civilian assassinations we were seeing in Minneapolis, or the violence of my family never knowing for sure who or what took the lives of our ancestors during the war. But there's also this other separation, the illusion of separation that I impose on myself all the time, like when I put on my headphones and stare into the abyss of my phone while riding the one train. This illusion of separation can be found in every corner of modern society, not just in my own behavior on the subway, like the political echo chambers shielding us from the views of the other, the borders we have drawn to separate both small communities and larger nations, the internet providing a space where we can say hateful things without any social consequence, and now AI, allowing us to engage in full-blown relationships with fabricated personalities. Humans, especially Americans, are very good at pretending to be self-reliant, individual, and set apart. We think that we don't need each other, but our faith and science tells us otherwise. In Buddhist tradition, delusion, or fundamental misunderstanding of reality, they are the greatest cause of suffering. Tara Brach, a psychologist and Buddhist teacher, explores at length the delusion of the separate self and the unreal other. She writes, "We create an unreal other anytime we begin to sense aversion and distance with another. There is the anger, blaming, and resentment we sometimes feel in our close-in relationships, but there is also a level of pushing people out of our hearts on a larger scale. In this understanding of separate self and unreal other, delusion blames and creates enemies. It fosters separation." Recently, I've been spending my Wednesday evenings at an Episcopal church, where I'm the social work intern for a weekly welcome center for new New Yorkers. It's a space for immigrants and undocumented neighbors to come and build community and get support. Each Wednesday, food delivery bikes line the courtyard of the church's side door. Inside, the Welcome Center buzzes with life. Over 20 volunteers and more than 50 participants sit together at tables, working on anything from asylum applications, resumes, or receiving haircuts. At 5, we serve a hot dinner and we eat together. In the back of the sanctuary, 2 volunteers and I host a weekly support group for the guys. Although most of the undocumented population in New York City are Spanish speakers, the folks who come to our Welcome Center greet each other in Arabic, French, and Wolof, a West African dialect. Almost all of the Welcome Center participants are African men between the ages of 19 and 40. Most of them arrived in the US in the past 2 years, and almost all of them came here alone, seeking asylum. I wish I could transport you all there with me right now. Open up a mini portal to the Welcome Center in this space. I wish you could admire the way Saad roams from table to table, dabbing everyone up as he makes his rounds. I wish you could watch the way Alpha does a little dance when he greets you. I wish I could pick the right words to describe the way that Adil shook my hand tight with gratitude the last time I saw him before he self-deported. Wish you could hear the way the room broke out into applause when a commissioner from the mayor's office spoke to the crowd of men one Wednesday evening, reassuring them that New York City is and always will be a sanctuary city. But mostly, I wish you could see exactly how ordinary the Welcome Center is. The men we serve, they're not villains or saints. They're just New Yorkers trying to find their place in the hustle. And the volunteers, trust me, with the attitude they give sometimes, they're definitely also just New Yorkers. They're neighbors who want to help. But even in the moments of joy or sadness or mundanity at the Welcome Center, fear of ICE is always lurking. And there is nothing normal or ordinary about that ambient fear. I'm afraid of a masked man walking into the sanctuary, and instead of seeing Saad or Walter or Alpha or Mamadou, he will see an unreal other. He will see an illusion. He will see men who he thinks are illegal aliens, criminals, men who are stealing jobs, men who deserve the worst punishment imaginable, separation. In Hannah Arendt's famous postmortem of the Holocaust, she writes that totalitarianism bases itself on loneliness, on the experience of not belonging to the world at all, which is among the most desperate experiences of men. Friends, in order to stop the forced separations we're witnessing in the news every day, we also have to address the illusion of separation each of us falls victim to in our day-to-day lives. The violence of forced separation is only possible in a world where we have normalized the illusion of separation. ICE officers can only detain, deport, and dehumanize immigrants when they are convinced that that person is separate from themselves, when they're living inside a delusion. How do we, as UUs, as Americans, how do we recommit ourselves to nurturing our interconnected web of interdependence? How do we escape the illusion? How can we remember just how much we belong to one another? There is a Jewish saying I have heard too many times to count. You cannot be Jewish alone. Literally, as a Jew, you cannot fulfill the mitzvot alone, the divine commandments. You cannot perform the rituals, you cannot repent, and you certainly cannot seek justice alone. It must be done in community. In our reading today, Palestinian-American poet Naomi Shihab Nye describes a scene in a place where I personally would actually loved to opt for separation, the airport. But Nye describes a far different airport experience than what I am used to. One where the stranger in distress is comforted and met with compassion. One with free apple juice and cookies for all to enjoy with matching powdered sugar-covered faces to boot. Long phone calls to family members of people you just met just for the fun of it. People being people together. This can still happen anywhere, Nye writes. Not everything is lost. I hate New York City, famously. But sometimes, when I least expect it, the city reminds me that I am far from alone. Did you see me? Saad, a participant from the Welcome Center, ran up to me one day, excited. Where? When? What? I was confused. I had no idea what he was talking about. On the subway platform in Brooklyn last weekend at Barclays Center, I said hi from across the tracks, but you were looking at your phone. Even in the small moments, the ones where all we're thinking about is our next destination, we could be missing the exactly correct moment to wake up from the illusion. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. Friends, may it be so, and amen.